I see a lot of people saying they'd rather play a Psykeeper over Elementor because they don't want to play the piano. But do you see a piano here? I don't. And yeah, that's all the skills you're going to use. Until much later anyway. At the very least, you can do this until you're past Galaphans. Every time I tell someone this though, I always get the same question. Does that do enough damage? And the answer is yes. Take a look at this. Testing on the neutral dummy here, we see Poison Cloud do 7800 on the first hit, and 8 ticks of 3900 each, for a total of 39,000 damage, which is 5 times the initial damage, but that's on a dummy. So let's look at an actual mob. In this clip at Antiquaries on the same character, the biggest number we can see here is 5300, and 5 times that is 26,500. Antiquaries have 45k HP, so 2 Poison Clouds is more than enough damage on their own. By the way, the next mob after Antiquaries are Luias, which are fire and take 30% more damage from water skills like Poison Cloud. So how can we abuse this? We'll use the following rotation. Start by gathering with Earthquake. Earthquake ensures all the mobs move at the same normal speed, which makes them group up faster and tighter so we can all of them with Poison Cloud. As a general rule, you shouldn't cast more than 2 Earthquakes between blink pools. Maybe once you have your Bloody Staff you can try for 3. Once you got a group of 10ish mobs or so, cast your Poison Cloud on them, nothing else. They'll die to the next Poison Cloud anyway, so until you can cast that again, go gather more. And that's the whole rotation. The AoE is never really supposed to end, so if you need to rebuff, you can either force it to finish by not gathering any more mobs, or just rebuff on the run. And whatever you do, don't gather with Windfield. Windfield makes mobs move at different speeds, and generally makes it impossible for them to group up, so you lose damage from not applying Poison Cloud to a bunch of mobs, and as a result, many of them will run away after a while because you couldn't kill them in time. Since we're using so few skills, we don't need a lot of skill points. At level 65, we max the only 2 skills we'll be using for a while. Level 70, we get our masteries, and we're basically done. You can max all the other skills by level 91 if you reskilled, or a bit later if you didn't. I wouldn't, but I won't stop you if you want to max them anyway. Oh, and all your stats points should go into int. You know, in case I needed to be extra clear about that. For your buffs, there's nothing too complicated here. Once your FS becomes a Ringmaster, they'll have enough points to max all the relevant assist buffs right away. And then you can get Spirit Fortune at 65 and Geber Tiferet at 75. I'm not showing it here, but you can start maxing Resurrection right after Geber Tiferet for all those times where you die but your RM has time to run. Gear-wise, there's a few interesting armor options you can consider along the way to 120, so let's take a look at those. First, there's the standard path where you can use Misty all the way to 105. You can use any of the other armor sets on the way up for additional health, defense, or both in the case of the 90 set. And finally, switch to Shurian set at 105 with a 20% speed and 5% more casting speed. Then there's the tankier options. The Saddle armor available at level 53 reduces damage from non-wind mobs by at least 36% if you use all 4 parts. More if you also upgrade your suit's element, and if you also use an element defense stone, you can get up to 76% resistance against the mob you're at. The gloves only give 10% casting speed though, so that's 5% less than any of the options on the left. At 105, you can switch out everything but the gloves for the Elsis helm, suit, and boots, which trades 27% elemental resistances for 10% casting speed and 5% block. Though, if I'm being honest, casting speed isn't super important for this style of hit and run, and having full saddle is tankier than using 3 pieces of Elsis like this. Some of you are probably going to wonder why anyone would want to be tanky while doing hit and run, and that's a logical question, but the answer is a practical one. In an ideal world, yes, you would never get hit and having all these tank stats is a waste. You're always better off having even a bit more casting speed or damage instead. But that line of thinking is too theoretical. People make mistakes, especially on Flife, where sometimes you don't even make a mistake and get rubber banded back. Where you try to blink pull and the game tells you you're blocked by an obstacle even when there isn't one. You get the idea. Shit happens. Being tankier can often mean you can make a mistake or get unlucky, but survive anyway. As we all know, dying's pretty bad for your XP, especially if you wipe near a bunch of aggro mobs and they don't move away, making rezzing difficult. In short, choosing higher casting speed sets is for those who want to optimize for the ideal grind, while choosing tankier sets is for those who want a more consistent hour-to-hour results by reducing the number of deaths. Or availability. Misty sets way easier to find than Saddle Boots and Gauntlets. No contest. Whichever way you decide to go, you'll want to get the Nomavis set at level 120 if you can find it, because the only way to get Nomavis pieces is from the Red Meteor Niker. It can be pretty difficult to put the set together, so don't feel bad if you can't find it and just stick with what you have until level 135 when you can get the Quishion set. Weapons, on the other hand, are much more straightforward. Guardian Staff can't roll Poison Cloud damage with weapon bonus scrolls, and weapon attack doesn't influence your damage a whole lot, so Guardian Staff, Stick of Velp Harpoon, and Siege Staff are all functionally the same for our purposes. Make sure to still upgrade Water +1 on them, especially the Siege Staff because that one has a natural lightning element you need to override. Unless you like doing 20% less damage for fun. And at 75, you get the Historic Staff since it has more casting speed and can roll your AoE skills with weapon bonus scrolls. Skip the Angel Staff since it doesn't have casting speed, then you can get Legendary Golden and Bloody Staffs. Obsidian Staff is too much of a damage loss to ever be considered a real option compared to the Bloody Staff. Once you have your Bloody Staff and Quishion set, you'll want to roll for at least 2% casting speed on each of your fashion pieces plus cloak, but not mask, for a total 10%. With that and a Clarity Potion, you can reach the maximum casting speed, which is 200%. This will be a significant DPS boost at the level you can reach it, which I'll get into later. As for weapon bonuses, we're really only interested in Poison Cloud. Earthquake and maybe Blizzard Awakes can be a minor contributors, but even a 25% Earthquake damage bonus is still going to be weaker than 5% Poison Cloud. Though you'll definitely get a lot more money from selling a 25% Earthquake staff and a 5% Poison Cloud staff any day. And before we move on, always make sure your staff is upgraded with Water +1 for 10% more damage on Poison Cloud. Higher element upgrade doesn't make this bonus any stronger, so save your money, unless you want a big glow. Normally, I'd leave this next section out, but generic leveling guides don't really work well when your playstyle revolves around 1 or 2 shotting mobs, all being locked to a single element. Also, we're the only class that would even consider AoEing at the stun trees and stun currents. So, first thing, if you're not 65 yet, go and either get caught up on quests, or if your Flame Geyser can do like 7,000 damage on the first hit, level at small Elder Guards and normal Garbage Spiders until you unlock your AoEs. At 65, you'll want to start with Boost in Darkon 3. Remongs and Fish in Darkon 2 have both at least one ranged variant that you can't really play around, and Carrier Bombs are electric, so you don't want to be using your Water Element Poison Cloud on them anyway. There's no specific type of boo you need to target here. Of course, captains will always be more efficient since they all die in 2 Poison Clouds anyway, but simply going where you can pull the most mobs will give you way more XP than anything else you can try to optimize around. Before we continue, there's a few things you need to know about the numbers you see on the right. Captain Boos have 31,000 HP, So half of that would be 15.5k, but I have here on the right saying your poison cloud should hit for 4200, which would be 21k when it's done ticking. The reason this number is so high is because of a pesky little thing called herd, which increasingly reduces your AoE damage dealt to mobs the more you pull. It's a compounding 10% penalty starting after the 8th mob, so the 9th mob only takes 90% of the damage, 10th takes 81%, the 11th takes 73%, and so on. Here's the rest of the chart for reference. Given the nature of our playstyle and the density of spawns we expect to be at, we'll rarely have more than 15ish mobs hit by a single poison cloud at any point. 20 as an extreme high end if we strolled into a particularly good respawn. And if we get a big pack like that, the next poison cloud is usually going to hit fewer mobs. So a 14th mob which only took half the expected damage will likely take full damage on the next cast to hopefully finish it off. This also means our rotation is planned around casting 2 poison clouds on every mob, which, despite what seems like a detailed breakdown just now, is honestly kind of based on vibes. Doesn't really matter though, cause they're minimum recommendations you'll smash through in a level or 2 anyway. Moving on to Mush Boys, you'll want to focus on just the Captain Mush Boys here since they're worth like 33% more than the regulars they share this spawn next to Irons with. Realistically though, there's not enough Captain Mush Boys here, so you'll have to grab normal Mush Boys too. Same principle as the boost though, you're always better off with more mobs than trying to go only for captains. Most classes will want to stay at Mush Boys until they can move to Pink Roaches at 78 or Antiquaries at 80. Elementors, however, are special snowflakes who actually want to go to Irons because all Irons give about the same EXP. There's something about the Iron spawn that makes blinking around weirdly awkward and prone to rubber banding in my experience. It could just all be in my head though. Putting that aside, I suggest you avoid playing greedy near the big pillar in the middle. As always, you want to prioritize more mobs over better mobs, so you'll be running all over the place here and maybe even crossing over and pulling some Captain Mush Boys at times. After Irons, you'll want to skip Watankas because their spawn isn't great, and it's easy to run into normal Watankas which are ranged and go straight to Antiquaries, but don't plan to be there for long either. You should only be at trees for a level or 2. They actually have surprisingly good terrain, and many people avoid the regular trees because of their stun, which means less contesting from other classes there. But compared to Luias, their XP is pretty bad, and Luias are fire so they take extra damage from Poison Cloud. The only reason we stop by trees is because they give more XP than Irons, but we can't quite get enough damage for Luias because of the level difference. You'll be at Luias for a long time. The next 6 levels of mobs are all electric, which basically locks us out of ever leveling at them. Not to mention their terrain sucks, so we wouldn't want to level there anyway. Fortunately, the mobs after all those electric mobs are Kerns, which are also fire. Kerns share the same problem we saw at Mush Boys. Normals and captains are worth 33% more than smalls, but here the terrain is also considerably worse. The normal Kerns also stun. The stun doesn't really matter since we're hit and run. As for the terrain, you'll just have to learn to play safe. The grates are probably the most complained about thing among mages, but there is a way to play around them. For the most part, you should just run straight to the nearest land if you have to run over the grates. You can blink off of them safely provided you're aiming your blink onto land that is slightly higher than the grates. Not something you can always use, but knowing which blink paths are guaranteed to work goes a long way toward making playing around the grates not nearly as frustrating. Of course, I'm a weirdo who prefers playing around those grates over clicking tiny glaffins, so what do I know? The all-popular Glaffins notably aren't fire, so you won't get here as early as you did with Louise and Currents, but you can still expect to be here for a while. For spawns, I recommend a flat platform of normals over the Captain's hallway. Captains are more dense, but the narrow space forces you to run in straight lines, making it difficult to group the mobs tightly. After Glaffins, the mobs have a pretty massive HP spike, with the level 104 Captain Glaffins having 65k HP, but the level 105 Chimeradons have 80k. I'm guessing here, but this is probably a hurdle that is too high for some people to continue playing solely with Poison Cloud, so let's pause the leveling route and go over the Windfield Rotation. Just like we did for the past 40-ish levels, we're going to gather with Earthquake because grouping the mobs tightly is still a good thing for our damage. Mobs will run away if you take too long to kill them, so limit your gathering time to no more than 2 blink pulls. Your third blink pull should be used to give yourself space to start doing damage. Once you're ready to start AoEing, you'll want to cast 3 to 4 Windfields to slow the mobs down. If you plan to cast 4, you'll want to blink away after the second cast. With 3 Windfields, try to greet casting all 3 before you blink. As a general rule, you'll want to blink to the left or right, bonus points if you go forward and left or forward and right, and generally don't go backwards. Sideways blinking groups the mobs better, and if you have Burning Field down, keeps the mobs on it. Also, if you blink backwards, you almost always run towards the mobs a bit to cast again anyway. But I completely understand if you blink backwards and panic. Everyone does that. I do that. On the first blink after you've cast your 3 to 4 Windfields, it's pretty likely you'll have a few unslowed mobs. To manage them, we'll cast Eye of the Storm to push them back into the main pack where more Windfields will have the chance to slow them. Eye of the Storm only has 10 charges though, so if you have the whole pack on you, they're just gonna eat all the charges instantly. So don't try to use it as a panic button. It's a very good skill in this specific scenario we have on our hands, but it's not the perma-pushing god skill some people wish it was. Nor do I think it should be. Anyway, after Eye of the Storm, you can drop your Burning Field and big cooldown AoEs. If one of them is a disadvantaged element versus the mob you're at, don't use it. Like, if you're at Earth mobs, don't use Lightning Storm. Same with Blizzard and Electric mobs, and so on. Blizzard and Burning Field sounds like a cool combo, but you've already slowed the mobs and are circling around the Burning Field, so it's really not doing anything special here. Also, this is the part of the rotation that has the most room to be simplified. There's not a huge difference between casting the 70 AoEs and just casting more Windfields, especially if you have a Windfield bonus on your staff, or you are at Earth or Electric mobs. Either way you go about it, you'll want to continue casting more Windfields, or Earthquakes if you happen to be at Electric mobs. Once there are only around 5 or so mobs left, throw a Poison Cloud on them and start gathering for your next pull. So, there's a very good reason why Poison Cloud didn't get used until the end just now, and it's related to Hurt. Remember the way Hurt reduces your damage? Yeah. The way Poison Cloud works is absolutely terrible when factoring in Hurt and this bursty playstyle. Poison Cloud is strong when it's given the time to do its best work. When you burst down the mobs like how we do with Windfield here, Poison Cloud will get 1 to 2 ticks before the mobs start dying. The poison's tick damage is based on the initial hit including Hurt, so even though the mobs with the strongest poisons died, the mobs with the weaker poisons won't take any more poison damage than they were before. You could use it at the very start so you could get the damage going while you're trying to slow them down, but it's still not going to be much more damage than any of the 70 skills we're doing, especially if you're at Electric mobs. So in short, you go 3 to 4 Windfields, Blink Sideways, Eye of the Storm, Burning Field, Big CDs if you feel like it, then finish with Windfields and Poison Cloud. Obviously, this is a big shift in where damage comes from now, so you'll want your LG staff and or your Bloody staff to have Windfield +1 with Windfield Awake if you can get it. Windfield now being our main damage spell, the Earth Element Bearnurkies are solid first mobs to be at until 108, when we'll want to move over to Metamets. If you happen to find that your Poison Cloud does enough damage to pop cranks, you could go Poison Cloud there instead. They're right next to the bears, so you can manually check at any time. This boxed area of regular Metamets is where you'll want to be at. Given the density of aggro mobs in Azria and how small this spawn area is, you might have some trouble with your RM dying, so keep an eye out. Metamet spawns are by far the best in Azria, so you'll want to stay as long as possible, only moving to Dark Yetis at 119 or 120, depending on if you can AoE at the long path spawn of Captain Metamets. Or just go Yetis early if your RM is dying too often. The Dark Yeti spawn covers a wide area, and the spawn density is more in line with the rest of Azria. A lot of people like to say this spawn is terrible, but I think that impression has a lot to do with their recently being at Metamets. If they tell you outlevel them, then either go Poison Cloud at Augus, or Windfield at Ghosts. Ghost spawns are nice because they're perfectly flat, and the King spawn is even circular to boot. No real element advantage here, you do a little less damage with Earthquake while gathering, and a little more with Burning Field while AoEing. Both are kinda whatever. Mammoth spawns are choose your difficulty. The best spawn is the normal mammoths next to the lake at the top of the cliff, but that's a narrow path. Cannibal mammoths right next to them have more room, but have a few annoying rocks you have to navigate around. Ancients on the bottom lake near the Augus have some rocks too, but a lot more room. And in my opinion, the worst spawns, so I suggest you stick with the smalls and normals. Aatrox. Look, I get why people don't like it here, but with this spawn density and the element advantage for Earthquake, it's worth learning how to play here. It's my favorite spawn personally. Just try to stay by this spawn near wilds, and it's sorta like the Captain Metamets. You like Metamets, right? Or just go to that small tiger spawn with no aggros like everyone else does. It probably works out just from your RM not dying anyway. Better still would be going to Meryl since they're Earth, and take 30% more wind damage, which is their bread and butter. It's right next to town too. You'll want to be here until you outlevel the normal Merylls, then head to Nagas. Nagas are the final mob you can hit and run at. Normals and captains don't really have viable spawns, so the only option is this circular area of smalls. Beyond here, your next mob would be Hunter Sharpfoot, which are level 162, and give 5 times more XP compared to the level 159 Krakens. This is such an insane XP spike that no other mob in Coral is a real alternative, even with a 12 level difference at 150. By the way, you got boosted at Hunters from like 135 or so, it would have leveled 10 times faster. Not really what you want to see in a level guide, but it's such a big spike compared to leveling normally, it would be irresponsible of me to not call it out. Okay, that was a long detour, but for the people who have the gear to continue poison clouding in the Darkon 3 desert, let's go back to that. Unlike the Windfielders, Bearnurkies are just a short stop until you close the level gap between you and Pop Cranks, which are fire. Pop Cranks are followed up by Metamets, so expect to stay here until 114 or 115. I suspect you probably won't have the damage to jump all the way to Augus at that level, but there's a real possibility you can Poison Cloud Metamets even through the element disadvantage. If you can't, well, just do Windfield here until you have the Poison Cloud damage to go to Augus. The mutant Augus near the bridge have a tighter, more natural loop around the spawn, but the blue Augus are honestly just as good. The difference most people lock onto is the fact that mutant Augus drop 135 set pieces, while the blue Augus drop 105. That's pretty relevant in the first week or so of FWC, but not so much after, so don't think too hard on it and just go to whichever spawn you like more. These are the final fire mobs you can realistically hit and run, which means they're probably the last mob most of you can Poison Cloud at. And with that, the number of people this guide still applies to has shrunk significantly. But anyway, numbers required to continue poison clouding get really high here, and with no more fire mobs, it can get really difficult to do enough damage, but I can at least assure you I've personally hit some of these numbers in the past. For ghosts, you'll want to be at princes and kings. Emperors don't have a spawn I'm a fan of, but if you don't have the damage to do this at mammoths, there's a hill spawn leading down to the mammoth lake you can stay at till 132. This guide really ends here at mammoths. You can make it work at all levels of mammoth, but the first coral mob is electric, and tiger spawns are mostly narrow corridors which are not conducive to grouping the mobs quickly for Poison Cloud. Also, at 135, you can easily get 200% casting speed, which is a massive buff to the Windfield playstyle, but doesn't really help Poison Cloud at all. And hopefully that covers everything, cause this guide is a lot longer than I was hoping it was going to be. So, I'm not gonna take up any more of your time, and we'll see you around.